and get started. My name's Janice Dysart. I'm one of the I guess I'm the only science librarian now based out of Ellis Library. And you should have, those of you online should have received a handout through email, and those of you in class, it's really just a handout to help you take notes if you want to take any notes. And the first thing on the handout is a URL to a guide with a lot of information I'll be talking about today, plus additional information. And to actually get to the guide through the web page, you can go to Services for and Services for Research Support. I'm not sure why this screen is shaking. That may make us all sick. Hopefully that stops. But anyway, right here under Publishing and Sharing is where to publish your research. And this guide, there's a lot of information on this guide, and I don't have time to talk about it all today, but you may want to go back to it later. I thought today we'd concentrate on publishing, how to publish, or where to find a good journal to publish in is what I'm going to concentrate on today. As you can see on the guide, there's a section for doing books, and I know one undergraduate student signed up for this section, and if they're here, there is a section on publishing undergraduate research, which lists places that specialize in publishing research from undergraduates, so that may be of interest. Okay, well, with regard to journals, there's really currently there are two kinds of journals. There are what I call the traditional journals. Those are the ones you're probably all familiar with. They actually started back in the mid-1600s. They usually have editors and most of them have what are called peer review, where people look at the articles first and review them before they're published. Usually they have a subscription charge that either individuals or libraries pay for so that other people can access the material. And then also they usually, sometimes now, not so much now, but some of them do have page charges where you have to pay a certain amount, possibly just over a certain number of pages or a certain amount per page. A few charge extra if you have graphs, color, things like that. But I think more and more of the journals are getting away from that, and they're not doing page charges as much anymore. That's certainly something you want to look at when you're deciding where you want to publish. And the second kind of journal that's come out really just in the last 20 years are the open access journals. And do people know what I mean when I say open access? Right. That means that if all readers can view the articles without paying any charges. There are no subscription charges for readers. But that does mean usually there are charges for the author. They're called article processing fees. And so the authors have to pay up front to have the article published. And that's kind of a growing field. Though there is, I guess, there are also open access articles where if researchers use government funding to support their research, usually now after 6 months to a year, the article has to be made freely available. So these articles usually start out behind what we call a paywall, where you have to subscribe to see the most current articles, but after 6 months or a year, then everybody can see the article. So, and then there are some journals that actually do both. The author can pay up front to have the article published open access from the moment it's published, or it's behind a paywall and it's a subscription, and those are called hybrid journals. So I guess in a way there's three kinds of journals. But we're going to talk about all versions today because it just depends on where you want to publish your research and your situation, which option you want to choose. So let's start with, well, when you're trying to pick out a journal to publish in, what characteristics would you like to see in the journal? What would you be looking for in a journal? Anybody want to volunteer? Yeah, well, and tied to that would be, you want, if your article is published, you want it to be visible. You want people to be able to find it so they can read it. And certainly you want it to be connected to your subject area. And then what I was just talking about were fees. You want to look at it. You'll want to look at, if you're doing open access, you want to see what the fees are up front to see if you can afford to publish in that journal. Or if they have page charges, that's something you want to find out before you submit your article. Well, I can tell you most faculty, I shouldn't say most, all faculty on this campus, in all campuses, they want to publish in prestigious journals. They want to publish in journals that have good reputations. And we'll talk a little bit about how to find those journals in a minute. And then the one other thing you may want to look at is how fast do they get the articles published? Because I'm a librarian, and occasionally I'll see journals where they're almost a year behind in their issues, and that's kind of slow. I mean, it may not matter as much in certain fields, but it's certainly in the sciences and even in the social sciences, you really want your work to get out fairly quickly. And even if you're in humanities, you really do want your work to get out there because you've done your research and you want to pass it on and let other people view it and get a chance to read it. So really you want to look for prestige, you want to look at how much it costs, you want to look at where people can discover your articles, and I left out one. Oh, speed, how fast they are. So let's go on to how do you find journals to publish in? Anybody want to offer a suggestion? Some of them are rather obvious. I mean, if you're a graduate student here, you might want to ask your advisor and see what they recommend. Another thing to do is when you're doing your research, you want to pay attention to what journals you're getting articles from to help with your research, because those could be journals that are publishing similar topics. And to help you with that, you can also look in some of our big databases like Scopus. Let's take a look at Scopus. Scopus, does anybody use Scopus? One person here has used it. Scopus is a big all-purpose database. It covers about 23,000 journals. It covers all subject fields, so it does sciences, social sciences, and humanities. And what you can do is you can just type in keywords describing your search. Anybody have a research area they're working in? You could just type in some keywords. What did you say, space?
Place, space, space.
Place, space?
Base. Base.
Oh, base, place-based. Okay, I understand. Based education. And I could have put that in quotation marks to get the phrase, but we'll just see. You may want to, actually, I think I'll go back and do that. I'm going to make this a phrase just since those words are kind of common, and if I don't put quotation marks around it, it'll just do and, so the words won't have to be right next to each other. So let's do that. Okay. Wow, that cut it way down because we went from 11,000. But what you want to do is look over here on the left where it says refine results. And if you come down here a little bit, you'll see there's one called source title. And if you click on that, it will give you the journals in the search results that are publishing the articles and how many articles are in each one. You can click on view more. I think you have to click on view more 2 times and you get, usually gives you up. The second time after view more, you can click on view all and it'll give you a pop-up screen with all the journals. So you might want to, in this case, you want to pay attention to the ones that are publishing multiple articles in this, on this topic. Some of them, of course, may be a little too specialized for whatever your topic is, but you can just look through them and then do some more investigation if you get a list of titles that might, of journals that might work for your topic. Now we do have, depending on your subject, we've got different databases you can look at. I know several engineers registered for this course, and we've got IEEE Explorer, that's a big engineering database. This is an education topic. We've got Education Full Text, it's a database that we have. We've got databases for humanities. There's a big one for psychology called PsycInfo. So you may want to get into the subject-specific database if you don't want to do the general, though this one does cover a lot of journals, Scopus. Now, if you want to look at prestige, the main way, the most accepted way for articles to be the indicator for prestige of journals, the most widely accepted one is something called impact factors. Has anybody heard of impact factors? Let's see, impact factors. Oops, I thought, I want to go back to it. I went to the wrong page, sorry about that. Impact factors. No. I'm not going too far. Oh, yeah. I forgot I put it right at the top. You may want to look at, well, if you look at impact factors, they can tell you where a journal is sort of ranked in its field. And an impact factor they're numbers, they're numerical values. And what they're, basically what they're indicating, if a journal will have a specific impact factor for a year. And what that is basically telling you is if an article is published in that journal, on the average, that is how many times that article is cited by other researchers. So if a journal has an impact factor of 5, that means if you publish an article in that journal, on the average, it'll get cited 5 times by other researchers. Now, that's not always true. I mean, a lot of articles in a journal won't have any citations after a few years, and others will have a lot. But it's just a way to measure it. And the shaded area in green tells you how they're computed. And what they do is they take the number of times articles published in the last 2 years were cited in the next year. So right now we're getting close to having 2017 impact factors. They actually haven't been released yet, but to compute 2017 impact factors, you take a journal and you look at the articles in that journal published in 2015 and 2016, and then you see how often those articles were cited in the year 2017. And all this information is gathered from an index called Web of Science. Does anybody use Web of Science? Nobody's used that. Web of Science is another big database like Scopus that covers journals in all different disciplines, social sciences, humanities, and science. It indexes, well, it covers about 12,000, well, it actually covers over 12,000 journals. Only about 12,000 journals are assigned to impact factors. They do not assign impact factors to humanities journals. Can anybody guess why they may not do that? Why they don't want to do that? None of you are in humanities, so you may not think of it. But in humanities, researchers don't necessarily cite journal articles that much. They don't necessarily build on other people's research like they do in the sciences and the social sciences. They may have their own little niche, and they do all the research in that area, and nobody else goes into that area. So citing articles in the humanities is not that big of a deal. They may actually cite more books than journal articles, but only journals have impact factors. So in humanities, you have to use a different ranking, find different ranking systems for journals instead of impact factors. But impact factors is the most widely used ranking for journals, and it's actually used a lot for promotion and tenure, for hiring purposes. It's very prestigious if you can publish in a journal with a high impact factor. Now, to find these impact factors, what you want to do is go to a publication called Journal Citation Reports. And this is a resource the library subscribes to. You do have to have a subscription to access it. It's called Journal Citation Reports. And what you do is you can search by your journal title. Let's just do one. Anybody have a journal they like to use? Okay. Journal of Geography. I'm using the upper left-hand search box. And if it's in Journal Citation Reports, it should appear in this drop-down menu, and you just pick the journal. And then you come down and look at this chart. And right now, the latest that's come out is 2016. The 2017 impact factors should be coming out in a few months. They usually come out over the summer. I'm not sure why it takes them so long to compute, since it should all be computerized, and I would think they could get it out faster. But so far, the company hasn't done that. And if you come across here, you'll see the journal impact factor for this journal for 1 year is 0.959. And if you want the 5-year average, it's 1.035. Now, by itself, the impact factor doesn't mean that much. You go, well, is that good? Is that bad? You don't know. What you want to do, once you know the impact factor, is come down to this, what's called rank. You can scroll down a little farther on the page and click on rank. And this brings up a little chart, and there's a list of journals in geography that have impact factors. And in 2016, this journal was 52 out of 79 journals in geography, which makes it the 3rd quartile. So it's not as good as some of the other journals in geography, but any journal that gets an impact factor is considered to be a quality journal, because not all journals have impact factors. And if you wanted to see, what you probably would be of interest is to see what are these other journals in geography, because you might want to pick one of those. And to do that, to see that, you come back up to, we'll go back to home, the home page. And instead of searching on a journal title in this box, we just come down a little further and you select categories. So if you just click on this arrow, there's an alphabetical listing of categories. And you can scan down there to see which category works, and there may be more than one category that works in your subject area. And we'll come down to geography. And you can see there's two kinds of geography. Are you physical geography or are you other? Okay, we'll go with that one. And the trick is you have to check off the category, and then you have to scan all the way to the bottom of the page and click submit. And now it's come up with the list of geography titles on the right. And you can see the most heavily cited journal is this Global Environmental Change, Human and Policy Dimensions. And it's got an impact factor of over 6. And then you can just scan down through here. I mean, some of these are fairly specific. It would just depend on your topic, which you'd qualify for. And you know, select some journals to look up, and then go to the journal webpage and just look at the information on the journal. You'll be able to see the editorial board, and they'll give you all the information about how to apply, how to submit your article and whether or not you have to pay any fees, any page charges. All that information will be on the journal webpage. Okay, so any questions on impact factors? Impact factors, I have to say, are a little controversial. They're really the main ranking system for journals that is widely accepted. Everybody, if you stay in academics, everybody knows what an impact factor is. But they're somewhat controversial because you could write well, in some cases, journals have tried to manipulate their impact factors. They've required authors to cite other journals that they publish. Sometimes authors will cite their own articles. And it's based on how often an article is cited, but you could write a really controversial article, or it's really bad research, and everybody's citing your research because it's so bad, to point out that this is really bad research. So how often an article is cited is not always a marker of a really great research. Usually it is, but not quite always. Now they're come out with a bunch of different tools for finding journals in different subject areas. Well, let's go back. And these are called journal suggesters, or journal recommendations. Publishers are coming out with their own. There's one called, let's just do Nature Science, which is a big publisher. Actually, they call it Springer Nature, excuse me. I used the wrong title there. And let's look at that one. Whoops. I don't know what popped up there, but we don't want it. Okay. Let's look at this. Let's see, journals, springer.com. Oh. I'm looking to see if I, I might have to use a different one. I thought I typed that in right, but who knows? Okay. Most of these, they give you a place to paste in your title and your abstract of your potential manuscript. So I'm just going to real quick look up an article so we have stuff to paste in. And this was an article published by one of the biology professors. And let's just do the article title. And let's get the abstract. Oops. Copy, and we'll paste that in. And this one wants you to do a subject area. So let's see what we got. Whoops. Well, we'll do environment. And I think I picked the wrong category because these don't look too great. So we're going to go back and do, let's try biomedicine. So it's possible this publisher doesn't have great journals in this subject area, and I have to say, looking at these titles, none of them match up that well. So let's try a different one. There's one that's kind of all-purpose. That's called, actually it's just called Journal Finder. Or Journal Guide is what it's called. Let's just look. And you can see it's kind of similar. You can put in the title, put in the abstract. Let's do. Oops. And we'll just put in light. Good, it came up. And if you're worried that somebody's going to steal your abstract or look at or steal your research by looking at your abstract, you can scramble the abstracts so nobody can tell what you're typing in. And this particular journal guide, it does really well with bioscience, biomedical journals, bioscience, and humanities and social sciences. Right now it doesn't cover physical sciences. And looking at this, these titles look a little more on topic, because I'm doing bumblebees, and here's ecological entomology. This gives you the publisher. This says impact. It's not impact factor. It's another journal ranking system that's a little bit different. They don't know how fast it takes to get published for this particular journal, but you can see some of the others. It does give you publication speed. And when it says open access, yes, it means you can publish open access. It doesn't necessarily mean the entire journal is an open access journal. So this may give you some ideas of journals to look for. Now, if you're doing, if you know you want to do open access, or you're really interested in publishing open access, there's a journal, kind of a journal suggester that's, whoops, let's get up here. Well, let's just come over here. That's only, it's basically an open access journal finder. And it only looks for open access journals. And we'll just put in our abstract here and do this. Now this is looking through a resource called Directory of Open Access Journals. And in order to be in this directory, you have to meet certain standards. And so it's a good place to look for open access journals. So this is a good resource to use if you want to do open access. And you can see over here on the right, the price varies. for how much it costs. Like this particular article we were looking at, it ended up being published in this +1 Public Library of Science. So the authors paid almost $1,500 to have this article published. Now, usually, I would say in academics, the authors try to get this written into their grant publication expenses. So they're not, you know, paying for it personally. They're getting it out of their grant funding. But you can see if you didn't want to spend that much money, you wouldn't want to apply to this journal. You might want to apply to this one down here. That's only $600. And for a few of these, you'd have to look on the site to see. But again, you can see publication speed does vary by publisher. Okay, let's go back. I'm going to go back to my guide for a minute. Has anybody heard of Predatory Publishers? At least a few people have. Okay. Has anybody gotten, let's go to the Predatory Publisher page. Has anybody gotten an email that looks kind of like this? I didn't, the highlights were made by the person who sent the email, not me. Because I get these all the time. There's kind of mass emails, and they're asking you to submit articles to particular journals. And usually these mass emails are sent out by what are called predatory publishers. And when we say predatory publishers, what we mean is that these are publishers that basically they want your money. They don't really care about making your research widely available to everybody, and they don't care about having a prestigious journal. They just want you to pay to have your article published so they can take your money and do with whatever they want with it. And those are called predatory publishers, and they're multiplying rapidly. And so you really have to watch out for predatory publishers. And some of the characteristics, they know that people are looking for impact factors, and these journals are not going to get impact factors because they have to be vetted. They have to meet certain criteria before they can be added to a database called Web of Science. And then from Web of Science is the one who computes the impact factors. So, but they try to use the word impact a lot on their websites and in their email solicitations. They just try to put impact all over the place. And you can see this one really outdoes itself. And it says high impact factor. But then notice it's JCC. Well, Web of Science, the official impact factors, their official name are journal impact factors. So it's JIF. So it's not JCC. But what you'd want to do, if in doubt, you'd want to take the name of the journal and plug it into journal citation reports to see if it has an impact factor, because you can't really keep track of all this. They also talk about this high IC value, which is index Copernicus value. This index Copernicus is a rating system that really was developed by predatory journals, so it really has no meaning to anybody. It's not something you don't want your journal to have this value, because that means it's probably not a good journal to be in. And what else do they do? Well, another characteristic is that they publish very, very quickly. And you can see the last date for paper submission is April 13th. This is from a year ago. But then they say notification of review results within 2 to 3 days of submitting papers. Well, I don't know if anybody's submitted a paper yet, but reviewers are normally faculty who have other jobs that they have to do. They have to do their own research and their teaching. They're not going to get, your paper reviewed in 2 to 3 days. It's going to take them longer than that. And then it says after they've reviewed it, it's within 2 to 5 days. Publication of papers within 2 to 5 days. Well, usually in the review process, they'll tell you, you know, some things you might need to change or update or improve in your paper. And then you have to do that. And then you resubmit it. And then they, you know, sign off on it. And then you have to sign the contract to get it published. So there's just no way that you're going to get a paper published, a legitimate paper at a really quality journal, published within 5 days of having submitted it. That just is not realistic. I mean, it's probably more like months in most cases, not days. So that's kind of a tip that's not, this wouldn't be a good journal to publish in. Now, another thing you can look at, if you're not sure about the journal, you can try looking for impact factors, but not all journals have impact factors. You can see if it's indexed by, say, Scopus or Web of Science, because they have criteria that journals have to meet before they add those journals to their databases. And then there's also a list of potentially predatory journals. And let's look at this. I'm going to just copy this. And this list of potentially predatory journals is called Beale's list. And Beale, Jeffrey Beale, is a librarian. I think he's out of Colorado. And he originally started this list several years ago. He would look at, you know, all the information about the journals and say, this is really suspect. And this is his original list here. And let's just look at, we're going to look up the journal that I had that email from. And they're on this list. I mean, if you go to their website, it does look, it looks a little suspicious. I mean, if you look at latest news, we're not talking real current here. But you can see they have they have their version of impact factors, and it's kind of busy. Let's go back. But Beale, I guess it was I think it was last year, he suddenly closed down his list. And he never really said why. People had all sorts of theories. They were mainly thinking he was pressured by these publishers he was just under a lot of pressure, and he finally decided not to deal with it. Well, somebody retrieved his list from the Internet Archive. And that's this original list right here. And this person is anonymously adding, I try not to get sick as I scan down through this list. At the bottom here, they're adding other publishers to, I'm getting close here. Yeah. They're adding new publishers that they think may be predatory. And you can see some of them, like, you know, Cambridge Scholars Publishing, you know, they try to pick words that sound really good as titles. So basically, this is a good list to check to see if your publisher's on this. And if it is, then you want to look at the journal very carefully to see, you know, what they're promising, what they want you to sign. And, you know, you want to check and see if their journals are being indexed by some of the other services like Scopus, Web of Science, PubMed. Depending on your subject area, you'd want to check that. So it's something to keep in mind. Nobody can say 100% this is a predatory publisher, but if they're following certain practices that raises suspicion, then it would be better for you to move on and look for somebody else, because they certainly do prey on, you know, they prey on new researchers and graduate students. People really want to get things published, and you can publish with them, but basically you've thrown your research away because it's not going to get credit. You're not really going to get credit for your research by people that are evaluating your work. So it's not going to count. So you just want to beware. Let's see. Okay, there's just one more thing. Let's go back. They're starting to create checklists for people to kind of follow when you're getting ready to publish your articles. So you have some steps to follow to make sure you get into a good journal. And this one came out last year. It's called Think, Check, Submit. And it's been established by, well, I think it was established by Springer Nature, which is a very well-known, reliable journal publisher, and some other publishers like that, and also the Directory of Open Access Journals, which is the one that keeps track of open access journals. So if you're publishing in an open access journal and you get a title, you want to check and see if it's in that Directory of Open Access Journals, because that's an indicator that they've met certain standards and it should be a good journal for you to publish in. And in this one, it just basically says, think about what you're doing, make sure you're on a trusted journal, and then it will give you a checklist. And just some of them, have you read articles in the journal before? Was it easy, as I said, to find, articles in this journal? And you may want to look at the editors, and you have to watch it on the editors, because some of these predatory journals have been known to just put people down as editors that have never agreed to be editor of their journal. They look for good researchers in the area and they just put their name down as an editor. So if in doubt, you'd want to contact the person and say, are you an editor of this journal? And get their address, from like their university site, not from the publisher site, because the publisher would just send you to, a bogus email account because they want your money. So as this says, you recognize the editorial board. And yeah, this is a clue. If you check the editors' their own websites, their own personal websites, normally they'll tell you that they're an editor of a journal, because that is in the system that's been going for years. These faculty members and other researchers, that they do the editing and they don't get paid for being editors. So what they get out of it is the prestige. They get, points at, when they're going forward for promotion and tenure, they get points for being editors of journals. So they want to put it on their website, their own personal website. They want to publicize the fact that they're doing this. And so they get some credit for it. And then you can look at some of these lists like Directory of Open Access, and there's also one on Committee on Publication Ethics, which are a listing of publishers that agree to follow these ethical principles and so forth. So it's it's not as easy as it once was, I guess, to find a journal to publish in, because there's so many journals now that are out there. The majority of which are, good journals, but then there's those bad apples that you just don't want to get involved with. So any questions about finding a good journal to publish in?
Probably a silly question, but why do you have to pay to have to publish it all? Why would we pay, especially where publishers it's not an access to charging, they're getting money off of it. Why?
Okay. Well, for online people, he's asking, why do you have to pay at all to have something published? Well, the legitimate open access publishers, they need to make some money to exist, though. But in the old day, yeah, well, I have to say, from the library point of view, publishers, many publishers, not all, but many publishers are making huge profit margins off the research, and it all comes back to primarily academics, where they want you to do the research to get promotion and tenure, you know, to get jobs. So they want you to publish, and then the library has to turn around and purchase the articles back from the publisher. Plus, in some cases, the author has to pay publishing charges, and the editors are working for free. So people keep pointing this out, that, you know, this is it's a crazy system. And yet it is very slow to change. And I mean, it's slow to change. What really needs to happen is that academic institutions need to kind of change how you get promotion and tenure. It should be like the quality of your articles, not how many that you get. Because now people are, you know, are publishing like the smallest little piece they can, because it looks better if you have lots of articles. Yeah, which is crazy. So the system has really gotten wild. I mean, I've been a librarian for a long time, and the number of researchers out there publishing now is just, in the past, since the 90s, is just skyrocketed. So there's a huge number of people out there needing to publish their research, you know, to advance in their career. And I've read that in China, at least some institutions in China, they pay a lot of money. The researchers get big bonuses if they publish in like Science or Nature, some of the more prestigious journals. They get, you know, a huge bonus. So it's gotten crazy. I mean, there's hope that the legitimate open access will help a little bit, but again, it may just be shifting the way publishers get their money. Instead of libraries, you know, instead of libraries and individuals subscribing to the journal, they'll just keep raising their article processing fees, you know, to make up the difference. But currently publishers, at least the big ones, I won't say all, because there are some nice society publishers, so not all society publishers are nice. Some of them are, they say they're nonprofit, but based on their prices, they sure look like they're profit. But Elsevier is always considered one of the worst ones, and they have huge profit margins of sometimes 30, 40%.
Is there a way to like be able to figure out profit margins? So like you as the academic?
Yeah, you'd have to look. I mean, you'd have to look at their annual reports, and I'm not sure how many of them are public companies. You can look in the literature and find some. I mean, they are starting to feel, I think they're starting to feel some hit, because libraries can no longer afford to subscribe to all these journals because they raise the prices of the journals way above inflation every year. And as you know, at least at the University of Missouri, we're not getting more money for the university every year, so the library's not getting more money. So we have to cancel, which means they're not making as much money from us, so I guess they raise the money on the people who still have subscriptions. So it's a crazy business. And hopefully in your lifetime, it'll change for the better. Yes.
Do you have any resources on how someone might publish their dissertation as a book?
As a book, well, I don't have a lot. You're probably better off talking to a humanities librarian like Ann Barker. But on my guide, I do have, go back, I do have a small section on books, trying to figure out where to publish. And that's about as much as I know on it. But I would, I don't know what subject field are you in?
Environmental studies.
Hmm. That's kind of such an interdisciplinary field. I can't say how many. I'd probably say if you look at this guide, there are places to look, you know, like where you sort of look to see who's publishing books on in similar topics. Like you can kind of scan Amazon. WorldCat is a big catalog of books that are owned by libraries around the world. And see who's published in that area, and then basically, you know, you'd want to investigate that publisher kind of to see what they're, get more information on the publisher, and if they seem good, you know, submit your manuscript and see what they say. But you can look, we got directories here, publishers, and again, yeah, look at publisher websites too to see what they're publishing in.
Can you specify what
WorldCat, WorldCat again, it's like libraries like this library, the University of Missouri. We put all our books that we add to our personal catalog. There's also an entry for that book in WorldCat. Like WorldCat will have an entry for a particular book, and then it will list all the different libraries that have it. So essentially, it's when you add what books that libraries around the world have, you end up with most of the books being published. Not all, but you'll be able to find most of the books being published. You can search by title, you can search by keyword, you can search by publisher. We have access to it. Well, I linked to it on this guide. That's probably the easiest way to get to it. I was going to say something else, and then I lost my train of thought. Let's see. You do want to, again, you know, kind of watch out for editors and the kinds of fees they're offering. Is, I mean, basically, I think the best practice is to try to find a publisher where you can see books that they've published, and but it's tricky. I think publishing books are probably a little more challenging than articles, because there are thousands and thousands of journals out there you can publish in, but there aren't, I would say, thousands and thousands of really good book publishers. Those, from the librarian point of view, they're still publishing a lot of books, because I see listings of new books all the time in my subject areas, and there's still an amazingly large number of books, and some of them are, we'll say, you know, a revised dissertation. Well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank everybody for coming today, and feel free to contact me in the future if you do have questions. I put my email contact information at the beginning of the handout, and it's also on this guide. I think it's on this guide. If not, I'll have to add it to the guide. Well, you can look for your subject specialist too.
Thanks.
And have a good weekend.